Hello, this is Unknown G from the future. Kind of a forward here before the video starts. The main VO for this video was done some time ago. When I was editing the video though, I kinda felt bad for going after journalists without giving them a chance to defend themselves first. You know, I studied journalism in college. I know how it feels to be in their shoes. And they state on their website that they try to go for the most accurate information possible. Sure, after reading this article I highly doubted that, but I still decided to send them this mail explaining my case and offering to write them a better piece. But after almost 2 weeks of no response, I tried sending them a message via Instagram, which similarly resulted in radio silence. At that point I wasn't feeling that bad anymore. And as such, I've decided to finish up the video you're about to watch. In no way do I mean any harm to the associated journalists responsible. I totally get them in fact, but my professors always said that I shouldn't wait too long for an email. If nothing came, then I just had to move on. And let's be 100% transparent here, someone wrote an objectively bad article. That means that someone needs to own up to it. And without further ado, enjoy the following slaughter. Okay, I'll admit it. I might have a bit of a problem. Every time I think I'm ready to quit YouTube, there's just that one little something that I came across sometime in the past that keeps gnawing inside of me. In this case, it's a mix-up of two of my favorite things, bad writing and Skyrim Cut Content. Ladies and gentlemen, what is it that kept me up for the past 2 months? Well, that would be this sad excuse for a gaming article published by thegamer.com. They probably knew it was a tad bit shit, seeing as they didn't even want to name an individual author. So what we have here is a list. 15 deleted scenes that fix major plot holes in Skyrim. And already the alarms are going off. We have some cinema terminology here that does not fit in with the context of what we're talking about. The tagline reads, "There is a shocking amount of content cut from Skyrim." Well, that much is true, I can confirm. True fans need to see these deleted scenes. And again with the movie terms. Skyrim isn't a game with video cutscenes, so the deleted scenes you're thinking of don't work here in the slightest. The game does indeed have scenes which can be deleted, but these authors don't know that. I very much doubt the writer has ever even opened the CK. So why should I waste my time explaining it? The next portion reads, "Skyrim is a vast game, sprawling landscapes, compelling storytelling and deep lore. However, Bethesda had intentions of making the game even bigger than the version we received." Yeah, well, duh. Unfortunately, not everything makes it out of the editing process, and many elements were left on the cutting room floor. And again, you mentioned the editing process, as if a game has an editor. Some of these elements suffered because of time constraints, difficulties in implementation, or just being too much information for the player at inopportune times. Sure. Just want to point out that the article never addresses which portions got removed due to which reason. You could say that's because no one knows, but then why explain it like this? Also, what does that last bit even mean? It seems like that refers to Savos Aran's removed dialogue, but that's not even mentioned in the article, so I don't know. What they all share is that they were axed from the final version of the game. Often these cuts created plot holes, though not always in the traditional sense. Again, I don't really get what they mean here. The content cuts create plot holes, but not really, is what this is basically saying. We're not even at the list yet, and the article is already undermining its own credibility a ton. Sometimes a cut piece of content could have indeed addressed a gaping plot issue, while more often than not the abrupt removal of these elements stripped the final version of the game of much needed context and development of key characters, groups and events. Again, you're just undermining your own work here by saying, "Oh yeah, well actually the title doesn't really make sense, but trust me on this one, okay?" My journalism professor would strangle me if I pulled something like this. This often led to gripes with mechanics, concerns with lack of depth concerning certain story elements, or good old-fashioned theorizing to piece together loose ends. I mean, sure, besides the fact this list won't be mentioning anything about game mechanics and this paragraph contains not 1 but 2 typos, this is mostly okay. Due to the fact that much of this content was near completion, modders have been able to create a lot these missing quests and mechanics from the assets that remain in the game's code, so the savvy player could use this list to help build a more complete version of Skyrim, one of the developers might have wanted to make given the right conditions. Missing content, more like missing words, am I right? But yeah, this is just a plain old lie. You'll see that almost none of the stuff mentioned here was in a state to easily or faithfully restore it, but rather most of it exists in the form of names and other bits and pieces. By the way, nice work patting yourself on the back there, asshole. And now we're finally at number 15 of the list. And it's just Nazim's house. Winterand Manor. Yeah, that's a really big plot hole fix there, guys. The usage of some ancient meme in a 2017 article also really screams professional. I'm not even gonna bother with the rest of the text here. It's not really worth it. Just some blabbing about Nazim sleeping at the Drunken Huntsman. Wait, hold on. What's this? In addition, the manor had specific NPCs that belonged to their own faction. This suggests that the estate had other residents, workers, guards, and perhaps its own questline. Oh lordy. Okay, I will need to go over these falsehoods here. So, something a lot of people overlook is that Winterand Manor was supposed to be in Whiterun itself, not on the outside. Which is an idea often propagated by mods. But that choice is usually made because the inside of the city doesn't have any more space for big houses. Yes, there is a specific faction for the house, just like there is one for almost every house. It only contains its residents, which would have been Alam and Azim. Yes, Acolyte Jensen also carries the key to the location, but it's not known if this was done on purpose or an accident. I can tell you for a fact that besides these three, there would have been no workers, no special guards, and most certainly no quests tied to the place. Number 14, the missing Gladiator Pit. It's not a Gladiator Pit, simple as that, it's a fight pit. This one reminds me a lot of the Fallout 3 DLC, The Pit. In what way does this remind you of The Pit? The name? Is that what does it? Or are you thinking of that very short section where you have to fight in an arena there, which has a completely different context in here? Is that the one? Obviously this content was cut from the game. Yeah, you can just drop that sentence, it's just filler. We already knew as much from the very title of the article. Though it was very close to completion, so much so that you don't need a mod to retrieve the content. It can be accessed, Jesus Christ, who proofread these daredevil through simple console commands on PC. This is of course also completely misleading. You can visit the cell meant to house the actual pit with console commands, and that's about it. The cell itself isn't even finished and there isn't much you can do there. But then you follow this all up with this absolute gem here. It seems this content was cut and replaced with Windhelm's Grey Quarter. It's really too bad this content was cut. It sure would make crimes fell, oh my god, like they had weight instead of just paying gold for murdering people. Okay, so first, where does that replaced by the Grey Quarter line even come from? I've read some misinformation back in my days, but I've never seen that. Sure, the place where the pit's fan entrance once was got replaced by a generic wall, but behind that is nothing but emptiness. The Grey Quarter was always there. And then secondly, you know you can still go to jail for a crime instead of paying the bounty off, right? Sure, either way it basically has no consequences for you as a player, but the way the information is laid out here is just deceptive. Number 13, the fast travel system. Now this text here basically states that Skyrim's fast travel system ruined the immersion and dictated the way the player did quests. That first point is pretty valid. As for the second one, you're not wrong. I just feel that Oblivion's omnipresent map marker is more of a problem on that front. Now yes, it's not as bad as in Fallout 3, but Skyrim still has plenty of quests where the player is meant to fight something or someone out in the middle of nowhere, lost to the ages, but the map marker still nicely shows you where to go. It's pretty crappy for sure. Then it talks about how Morrowind did it, and yes, Morrowind definitely reigns supreme when talking about alternative travel methods, but you may think the article will use these things to segue into the simplified carriage system for Skyrim, right? Well, no actually. That's not even brought up. What is brought up is Skyrim's removed teleportation stones? Yeah, this completely confused me, as I have never, ever heard of something like this. I even wonder where exactly they got this from, as most of their info is sourced from easy to access sites, yet I can't find anything about these supposed stones anywhere. I checked the CK just to be sure, and while there is an unused teleportation spell effect, there is fuck all indication that this was meant to be tied to some kind of standing stone cousin. Number 12 is the Whispering Doors cut portions. These should be fresh in your mind, well, they are in my mind at least. However, it's very clear that this article was written before my deep dive was made. Ah well, who am I kidding? My video wouldn't even have made a difference as they couldn't even copy the pre-made research done on several wikis correctly. There's no mention of Dagny here. It states that Frothar sacrifices a horse, which isn't true, and despite correctly interpreting that the children would kill Balgruuf, the article mistakenly refers to this act as fratricide, which is completely wrong. It should be patricide. Number 11 is just completely false. Like, not a single thing mentioned here is actually based on cut content. The one thing I can think of that this is based on is the divorce info mentioned on the cutting room floor. But that was also made by someone misinterpreting the script. It was removed from the site for that exact reason by yours truly. Guess that wasn't enough to keep people from spreading misinformation though. Number 10. Okay, look at this text. This portion here is preamble, these 2 sentences talk about the actual cut content, and the rest is flavor text trying to appeal to morons with a what if scenario. That really annoys me, since they don't even mention that it was just a Radiant quest, so it doesn't hold any weight at all. While they try and paint it like some grandiose standalone quest, they could have also mentioned how this quest was once meant to be the rejoin quest in case you broke one of the college's rules. But alas, they also missed that chance. Still, all this isn't what pisses me off most about this entry. No, that honor goes to the fact that they used the wrong your here. That's fucking elementary level spelling here guys, Jesus. Number 9. Again, preamble here, the cut content quickly described here, and then literal lampshading of their own lack of capabilities. The title here is wrong in 2 senses, as not every small town was cut from the game, but the entry doesn't even make mention of all the towns that were cut from it. It only mentions one town, doesn't even name it, and then it mentions a singular removed farm. Again, there's far more than one removed farm guys, and I feel like I don't need to say this, but Dawnstar isn't the name of a hold, the name of the town is Heljarken, it wouldn't have multiple shops, just an apothecary and a blacksmith, but I guess someone also misinterpreted that seeing as blacksmith is mentioned separately here. And you don't have to say that something is cleverly named and then also put in nice. Like one or the other would have made your point just fine. And to make things more ridiculous, here's number 8, Iron Tree Mill. This should have just been consolidated into the previous entry, but then it'd be hard to make this list, right? It mentions here that the mill would be run by 2 veterans of the Great War, which again is never said anywhere. It's one thing to misinterpret game code, but this is just misinterpreting written dialogue. Then we waste 2 sentences on highlighting the fact that the brothers have different personalities, like wow. Then there's just another falsehood stating they were meant to have an entire village of NPCs around them, which is probably something they get from the cutting room floor mod's unfaithful interpretation of the mill, as that is how it appears there. The picture associated with this entry also comes from the mod page of the cutting room floor, which only strengthens my belief in the fact that they got the information from there. Of course, the picture doesn't actually represent the mill, but rather Borderdark Farm from the previous entry, so fuck off. Number 7 makes a big deal out of how it's weird that Jarl Balgrove awards you with a house that you then have to later buy. Guys? Hello? Jarl Balgrove never does that? He gives you a house. Carl? Then there's all this bogus about the options the player would get about dealing with Tarek. No, just no. Tarek was just a random NPC that got the axe. He had no quest, no plot relevance, just a bit of flavor dialogue, and that's it. Number 6. Wow, I think this is it. The first entry where none of the cut content is either embellished, made up, or misinterpreted. Still, I'll give some more info here. Yes, it's true there was once a system in place to have the ghost of a random NPC show up after they died. There was also a system to make people mourn for a bit after a relative died. These were world interaction kill quests, just like the inheritance letters in the final game. Something that the entry doesn't mention is that these were once again just generic Radiant quests. These quests have been deliberately blocked off by the developers because, well, I suppose that it would just be a little bit ridiculous to have a ghost pop up in the middle of a city after you kill every 4th NPC, for example. Yes, ghosts have always existed in the franchise, but that still would have been a bit too much, I feel. So the developers making this cut, I totally stand behind it. Number 5. Oh, now we're back on track. This entry talks about the removed quest that would have had Chief Maulik of Narzilbur's stronghold reconnect with his childhood friend Uglars. So what's wrong here? Well, first it states that no orcs are ever seen in the main storyline, which is wrong. Then it uses the name that was made up for the quest by the cutting room floor mod, as it originally had no name left over in the files. And then finally there's this explanation of the quest, of which I have totally no clue where they got this from, as neither the files nor the mod restoration ever come close to this. I can only assume they made this up for some reason. Number 4 is once again oddly correct. It mentions Boethiah's bidding. And while it doesn't really go in depth, God forbid, what it does say are facts. This really surprises me, as there has been misinformation about this quest in particular for years. My first contribution ever to the Cutting Room Floor site was correcting the fact that Eriker was called Elisif's brother, and I remember another site where the name given for Elisif's brother, who doesn't exist either way, was something completely made up. So yeah, I'm pleasantly surprised. Have to dock a point for misspelling the word Daedric though. Number 3. This entry just encapsulates all the content removed from the opening. Which is fair, I suppose, and they likely got their info from the original opening restoration mod by Public Gamer, seeing as their picture comes from said mod page. I guess this entry is fine, though it lacks depth like so many others do. Yes, you could fight alongside Ulfric, but you could also do so with Tullius, only his dialogue didn't survive while Ulfric's did, so that's why that gets restored. I also really like the small dialogue exchange between Tullius and Elenwen. I suppose that in this case a plot hole does get acknowledged, if you count it as one. Same goes with Lokir's dialogue, which I think is just a bit better in the original version. Though I have to say that Raloph's Talmor bitch line does sound very forced and juvenile. Glad they cut that one. But that's something subjective. I don't know what the wider community stance on that line is. Oh, something Future Me also wants to add here is that the article weirdly doesn't name Elenwen when talking about the Talmor emissary General Tullius would have spoken to in the intro. Even weirder is that they actively use male pronouns when describing the emissary, which very strongly suggests to me that they really don't know what they're talking about here. Seeing as, you know, Elenwen is kind of a major player in the overall story of the final game, and she still actually makes an appearance in the final game's intro too, so there really is no excuse for this. Number 2. Yeah, that's a number 2 alright. Yes, Phalion is indeed an interesting character. Yes, Bethesda keeps his backstory very vague, but no, he is not Mortal's court mage. This is such a weird inclusion here, as while the previous entries weren't the greatest, they at least talked about cut content. This one talks about how the possibility of cut content could have improved the character. I do agree with this stance, as it felt like Bethesda was trying to go somewhere with Phalion, only to forget, rather than them just keeping him vague for the sake of it, but to have this on the list? I don't know. There are so many other possible picks here, it's insane. And finally, number 1. And one I definitely agree with. The Civil War. What I don't agree with, however, is this article once again. Each halt would not have 12 quests. They would have had a random selection of quests, all of which build up towards a city siege. This part I'm also not too sure about. The player would decide when and where to attack. But the biggest offender is this ending statement here, which makes it sound like Bethesda cut this for being too cool and expansive, rather than them having to simplify it in order to conform with this abhorrent piece of marketing. And yeah, I guess that about covers most of this great article. Oh, and I'm just seeing this now, but what the fuck is this thumbnail? To all my fellow journalists and journalism students, every time your pitch gets rejected, just know that stuff like this gets published. Peace out.